Melnor has been innovating lawn and garden watering tools for over 75 years. Use a relaxed grip watering wand to gently water delicate flowers and hanging baskets, or an 8-pattern nozzle for a variety of watering chores. Relaxed grip handles are specially designed to provide the most comfortable grip, so you can get more done with ease. Find Melnor at a garden centre near you or on Amazon. Visit us online at melnor.com.
Hey guys, so before we jump into the podcast episode, we wanted to tell you about an awesome, exciting thing that's going on. We're having a new online gardening course called Flourishing in the Shade, how to make the darkest parts of your garden shine. And that's coming up really soon in March. Who's it with, Carol?
We are going to hear from Ed Lyon. He's the director at Ryman Gardens at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa. And he is a great plants person and really an expert on shade gardening.
He really is. He's written most of our most popular shade articles for fine gardening, including 27 new and exciting ground covers for shade. Gotten to see part of this course. It's really, really cool. So you guys go to finegardening.com and check out Flourishing in the Shade. You can sign up and register for the course there. It's on demand, so you can watch it whenever you want to. And it goes live on March 24th. So you want to register before March 24th. Go to finegardening.com for more about our shade course. Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants,
but not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm associate editor at Fine Gardening.
Hey everybody, I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the executive editor here at Fine Gardening, and today's topic is me sitting in the back seat.
Favorite spring greens. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
So Carol is getting her dream topic. So I'm going to sit in the back seat of the car. I'm going to put the window down. I'm going to look at the scenery. I'm going to chime in when I want the radio station played. And I'm going to let Carol take it away. Now, Carol, why did you want to do this topic?
I love growing greens, and spring is the absolute best time to do it. And I think also because this is a March episode and it's, you're thinking about St. Patrick's Day and all the new growth coming up in the ornamental garden. But even if you don't grow vegetables year round, you could throw some spring greens in an empty bed this time of year and have a crop and then put something else different in the summer. And, so even if you don't have a dedicated vegetable garden, this is something anybody could do, even in containers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. Like containers, a lot of times, the soil in those warm up actually faster than the soil in the garden. So, you've got a window box, you can just have that on the back patio, sprinkle in some greens for that. And it is kind of fun, I will say, regardless of whether I ever eat the mesclun mix, every year I throw mesclun mix into like a corner of the garden because I love it. It germinates pretty fast. So, most spring greens germinate pretty quickly, correct? I'm gonna keep looking at Carol this whole time going, right. Give me the thumbs up. Am I good? So they germinate pretty fast. They are really beautiful. I mean, just talk about an ornamental edible. And yeah, you can eat them too. And a lot of times you can eat them as, little baby greens before they fully mature, and they just keep going the distance for you. And talk to me about succession planting with greens, because in New England, where we are right now, and in other sections of the country, more and more I hear the Midwest talking about this, that one day it's, hold and steady in the 40s and lower 50s. And then the next week it's 90 degrees. So, at that point, are we out of the game with greens? I know you plant them year round, right?
I do, but it does slow down in the middle of summer because most of these things just do not love the heat. But I'll talk about for some of the ones that I have on my list for today, you could plant them every 7 to 10 days or every 2 weeks for pretty much the whole summer. And so that you do have that steady supply of greens, like, because once you're used to it, you really kind of want it to keep going.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, all right, talk to me about your first spring green. And do we have to define green? I don't think we have to define greens. I mean, it can be an herb, it can be lettuces, it can be Asian greens, it can be, right? We're doing the gamut, correct?
If it's green and you can eat it, it's yeah,
It's
it could be on this show. Yes.
Okay, excellent.
All right.
So, what is your first green thing that you can eat that's on the show?
Okay. And this one you could also put in an ornamental arrangement. It's a great plant. So this is Tokyo Bekana. It is a Chinese cabbage, Brassica rapa variety chinensis. And
Okay.
it is a fast maturing, non-heading Chinese cabbage. And so it makes these little beautiful chartreuse ruffly leaves. And you can start harvesting them at 18 days after
Holy
they
cow.
emerge, right? And they're adorable. Like when they're brand new, little tiny, they're as sweet as lettuce. They really don't have that like cabbagey taste. They have a lot of, a relatively large amount of sugar in them compared to some other greens that are a little maybe more bitter. But so delicious flavor, great texture, nice contrast with darker greens. So if you're making a salad mix, it looks great in there because it really is unique and different. It's like the color is just not like anything except maybe, some of the ruffly lettuces that are the light colored ones, but not like other cabbages really. And for this one, succession plantings every 7 to 10 days is good
Oh,
for this
wow.
one. So you can have it, pretty much all summer. It doesn't mind the heat as much as some of the other greens do. So I have grown this in the middle of summer, but a lot of water. And I think that sort of holds true for all of these. They love water. And so, keep them watered and you should be able to grow this pretty much from last frost or even a little before last frost right through till fall.
Nice, nice. Now, as far as, every 7 to 10 days, then when do you pull back and stop, or do you not stop? Do you continue sowing all the way through summer with this guy?
For me, it's like I get traveling in the summer for
Mm,
our job, and that's really like the only thing that keeps me from that schedule of
okay.
sowing and also garden space. But once you've harvested it and it's sort of run its course, I will generally pull it out and start something new in that space. So you just always have something going on.
Gotcha. Now, all right. So you bring up an interesting point because years and years ago, when working on Grow magazine, which was our special publication that was dedicated all to vegetables, there had been a gardener, and if you're listening, this gardener is listening because I don't remember who it was, had a really interesting idea that greens were really good too for succession planting because as taller vegetables grew up, they cast shade down below by their bare legs, and greens actually really appreciated that environment. So even in warmer climates where things got a little toasty, say, here for us in New England, the Midwest, perhaps, the Pacific Northwest, you get that nice, shady environment down in the lower depths of the vegetable garden. Do you, do that in your garden too? I never knew if it was just a myth and it sounded really good that this gardener was saying, oh yeah, you can double crop in one spot.
I have done it. I don't think to do it, but I think a lot of greens are happy enough with sort of a partial shade situation if it's not deep shade and it's
Mhm.
not like tree roots or whatever. So as long as the soil's good, as long as the moisture is good, I think definitely a little shade could be beneficial. Like, and I have noticed I do have in my vegetable garden, the one end of it that's closer to my house get some nice shade in the afternoon, and that's a place where greens do really well because they appreciate it when it gets to be like above 80. That's when it happens is in the afternoon here, and so if there's shade on them at that point, that really seems to help them last longer and not bolt as fast.
Nice, nice. Okay, now say your first green's name again, because I've already forgotten it since I gave you a Q&A for the last 5 minutes.
It is Tokyo Bekana, and that's a Chinese cabbage.
Tokyo Bekana. And is this something that I can find at, most seed suppliers pretty readily, or is this going to be a specialty online seed seller?
I would say mail order, yes. Multiple sources have it. I do
Okay.
not know if you're going to find it in the garden center.
Okay.
It depends what brands they carry, but yes, this is something that multiple people are growing and selling.
Okay. All right. Awesome. All right. Well, amazingly enough, I came up with 4 greens. Now, some that I have grown and some that I have aspirations to grow this year for various different reasons. And one of the ones that I have aspirations to grow this year, but have grown the straight species before, is arugula. Now, I have had a long love-hate relationship with arugula. I used to hate it because it was very strong to me. It had too much of a peppery flavor. I found its flavor profile to be overpowering most of the time. But I've learned that, arugula in moderation is lovely. It adds just a little bit of spice to your salad mixes. It's really nice as a wilted green if you throw it in at the last minute to a stir fry or something like that. So I've come a long way in my from hate to now maybe not love of arugula. But this year I want to try red streaked arugula, which is, to me, I'll be honest, I just saw it and I thought, gosh, that's beautiful. That is a beautiful plant. I would grow that just for its looks alone, even if I couldn't eat it. So what you're looking at is a normal arugula leaf, which is kind of this forked, almost dandelion leaf looking green, but and it's bright green. It's, this beautiful kind of Kelly green that just glows when it's backlit. And with this red streaked cultivar, the leaf veins are all a dark burgundy color. So you really get that really cool contrast. From a distance, you wouldn't even think that it's an arugula because it looks like it's more in, like the kale family or something like that. 20 to 40 days to maturity. So this is pretty quick. And I will say that arugula is sometimes, I mentioned at the top of the show, I throw in a mescaline mix every now and then, just because I think it's charming and beautiful. A lot of times arugula will be in that mescaline mix because it does, size up rather quickly. And as a microgreen, being able to, harvest it when it's teeny tiny, just a few leaves, you kind of pinch off a few leaves here and there. It is one of the first vegetables, quote unquote, that you can harvest, which is so awesome. And then, as long as you make sure you don't decimate it and allow enough of the foliage to stay behind and mature, you're in good shape for it to go the distance. You direct sow in early spring as soon as the soil can be worked. That's different everywhere you live. So that's really something that you want to look into at your local extension service or go online as well. You kind of learn when that last soil, when the soil can be worked. But basically it's, you put your hand on the top of the soil. It doesn't come away with frostbite. You can take the soil in your hand and kind of squeeze it, and you're not squeezing out mud. It's just a nice friable, workable soil. And that's pretty much what when the soil can be worked means. I sow it super thickly. So, kind of don't pay attention to put a seed every 6 inches. I just kind of sprinkle it along. It does need a little bit of light. So, you do want to just sprinkle it along the top of the soil surface with maybe a scant sprinkle of soil on the top. But this is not something that, you're driving into the ground like a pea seed. And at a certain point, I thin out to, about 4 to 6 inches. So everything all those little seedlings that come up in between those 4 to 6 inches, yum, that's harvestable. Then I eat those, which is so awesome. So you're kind of getting, double your pleasure in one little growing patch. I will say, arugula isn't as bad as cilantro and how quickly it bolts and goes to flower, but arugula, once those temperatures start climbing into, the upper 60s, lower 70s, you'll see this plant. It'll go to flower with these tiny white little star flowers. And then pretty much the season's over for you to be able to eat the leaves. The leaves then become really, really bitter. But the bonus is that pollinators love those flowers. They're pretty nondescript, but they're white, they're starry, and the pollinators go bananas. And then just let it go to seed. Maybe that's because I'm lazy, but I just kind of let it hang out there. And oftentimes it does a succession planting itself. It goes to seed, it drops its seed, and then all of a sudden I see generally, like as we start creeping into late summer, early fall, little baby arugula is kind of going up in its spot. So this year I'm going to try red streaked arugula. I think that it's beautiful. It's got all the good attributes of arugula, regular standard green arugula, but it's pretty too. Carol, are you an arugula fan or are you an arugula foe?
I love arugula, and those little flowers are delicious. So when it bolts, you can cut a few of those off, sprinkle them on a salad. They look very pretty, and they taste like arugula, and they have a little bit of sweetness, like the pollinators like that nectar. And you try it; it's good.
You heard it here first, folks. That's your fun tip of the day about arugula. All right, so we started off with a lesser known green, I would say, from Carol. What do you got next on your list?
Okay, this one is Swiss chard. And so I think it's sort of an old-fashioned green. My parents grew it, my grandparents grew it. It's a good for cooking, and that's how we would have it when I was a kid. But also in the baby leaf stage, or even you can grow it like microgreens. At the very earliest stages of growth, you can eat it, and it's delicious. And it has that sort of earthy taste that if you like beet greens, it tastes a lot like beet greens. And I think it's related. So the Latin or the botanical name for it is Beta vulgaris. And I think, but I didn't look it up, that's the same as beets.
It is.
But if not, I think that, if not, they're very closely related. So you don't eat the root of this, you eat the leaves. And the thing that is just so extraordinary about chard is the number of colors that the stems come in. So a lot of people grow bright lights, which is a mix of different colors. And I'm going to go on record saying that I'm not a bright lights grower. I like to buy the individual colors and plant rows of them so that I have a little more control over the mix, because it seems to me like the different colors and the different cultivars grow differently from each other. So having them sort of all mixed in together, I don't know. It's fine, but I don't do it. I like I get my seed from Johnny's, and they have one called Ruby Red that's also called rhubarb, I think. I like to call it Ruby Red because I don't want people getting confused that this is rhubarb. It does look a lot like rhubarb. It has the dark, dark, dark red stems, and the veins go out into the leaves. It's just beautiful. And then there's one that's called bright yellow with yellow stems. There's one called Oriole that has more of an orange stem. And one that's called Peppermint, which is streaked with gorgeous, like almost fuchsia pink. That streaks of that with white. There are ones with white stems. It's just they look pretty when you mix the colors together. Like I said, you can eat it raw, you can eat it cooked. If it's 60 days to maturity, and I think maturity in this case is cooking stage, but pretty much from emergence on, you can harvest. And the thing to know about with chard is that if you cut up, there's sort of where the leaves come out. If you cut above that, it will continue producing new leaves throughout the season. So the photo that I put in the show notes shows the four varieties that I mentioned. And that was taken at the end of summer. And I just cut off all the cruddy looking leaves. This was for a video shoot. And I needed some kind of, attractive vegetable. The shoot was to show the hoop tunnel that I was going to put over it to extend the season. So you'll see these are pretty mature plants, but they have a variety of, very small leaves up to the very large leaves that then after the video shoot, I was able to harvest for weeks afterward.
Nice, nice. I think chard is so beautiful. I feel like start putting it in flower arrangements. Like it is just a really attractive green. It's sturdy, it's upright. I mean, I think that's another good selling point for it because hey, spring is unpredictable, and many of these greens, these delicate leaves of these greens can really, sometimes suffer a little bit if we get some serious spring, wind and rain and that sort of thing. Chard is like, man, it's tough. It's super tough. But yeah, I love the idea of individually buying the colors as opposed to bright lights because I think that you're right. When I've sown bright lights in the past, it seems like, there'll be like two standout varieties, like maybe the yellow and the white will do really, really well. But then there's a purple and a pink that really never go beyond like these weak little floppy leaves that are in between, and I always thought, oh God, what am I doing wrong? Which I am probably doing something wrong, but I like that you gave me the excuse that no, you need to buy like the individual colors is where it's at because they do probably have different likes and wants and needs and that sort of thing. Now, Carol, what you didn't talk about is thinning out. Like, so is this something too that you're going to sow pretty thickly and then thin out in between, or are you individually planting out the seeds in your spacing model when you first grow or when you first sow?
So it kind of depends whether I'm direct sowing in the garden bed or if I'm starting inside. And if I'm starting inside, I'll do it like 5 or 6 weeks before the last frost. And what that gains you is an earlier harvest. And another thing that is a tip, and I forgot to mention this, is that chard really likes cool, mild weather. And so that's like, if you started a little too late and the weather just like shoots up to, into the 70s in the spring, it isn't going to germinate quite as well. And it does have some heat tolerance once established, but during those early critical weeks, it just doesn't love a heat wave. So if that happens, water is pretty much what you can do. Nan Andra, who's been a frequent contributor of photos and also an author for us, she mixes chard into her ornamental bed. So yeah, and it's gorgeous.
Stunning. I mean, imagine like just a mason jar, a simple mason jar with, some fresh cut flowers from the garden, but then chard stems too. So you can see like down at the base of the arrangement, you can see all those bright stems kind of mixed in. I mean, that to me just sounds Instagram worthy. It really does. All right. So don't yell at me because I don't think this is, well, all right, no, because at the beginning of the show, you said if it's green and if it's in spring, then it totally, and you can eat it, it totally counts. So I'm going for a non-traditional green because I was struggling with this one, I will admit. I'm going to do pea shoots because I love peas. I think of peas for me because I don't do a lot of greens growing. I think of them as, pretty much my first vegetable that I get out there into the garden and sow. And pea shoots are delicious. Now, I know that they become all the foodie rage now that, you'll go to a restaurant and, the very last thing on the description of a meal will be in a flourish of pea shoots. And it sounds pretentious as you know what, but they're delicious. They're so, so delicious. And a pea shoot is basically defined as just a very tender new stem of a pea plant. It can include the actual stem, a couple of leaves, a bit of the tendril, but it is a great candidate for one of the first things that you can harvest out of the garden because you can oversow your peas, but you don't want to let them be oversown for their entire growth period because peas will choke themselves out. They are vigorous vines and you will not get a great harvest, whether you're doing pole peas or sugar snap peas that stay a little bit smaller. You really do want to thin those out to, usually about 4-6 inches really on your trellising system. But if you want to just sow those, kind of marble-sized seeds all in a row right next to each other, you can come through and basically be cutting out every other pea seed that you sowed and use those little sprouts, those little babies, as your pea shoots. And they're delicious. They're delicious stir-fried. They're delicious fresh, just to sprinkle on salads. Yes, if you want to be, kind of pretentious and hold a dinner party and, put a flourish of pea shoots along the top of, whatever protein dish you're doing, you can do that too. Nobody will fault you for that because you actually grew them. And it's a really, really nice way to take advantage again of, the space that you're already allotting to peas. And I will say, I start to get resentful because peas take up a lot of room and it takes them quite a while to actually come to maturity. You're looking at a good 55, 60 days before you're harvesting those peas. And then all of a sudden it's over in a flash, right? So you've allotted this amount of space. So it gives you an option for being able to use, some of those pea tendrils, those pea shoots in the meantime to, give you something back for the space that you're allotting to them. Sprouts occur about 20 days after direct sowing if the temperatures are in the 40 to 50 degree range. So, figure then that you can harvest pea shoots about 20. But if you wait until, the temps are around the 60 degree mark instead, a little bit later in spring, peas can sprout and germinate and shoot up in about 7 days. So you're seeing those shoots, and then very quickly after, within a week, sometimes up to 2 weeks, you can harvest those pea shoots, and that's the perfect tenderness level for them. If you go beyond 2 weeks or so, generally they get a little horsey. I think that's the best way to describe them. They get a little stringy, they taste a little earthy, which AKA, I think earthy is dirt. It tastes like dirt. You don't want it to taste like that. But yeah, I also love the fact that, because pea shoots have become, risen in popularity because of the culinary circles have elevated them. They're really expensive. You ever seen pea shoots in the grocery store, Carol?
Yeah, and they don't hold well. So you pay all this, and then 2 days later they're slimy and gross. I like the idea of just going out and getting them from the garden, rinse them off, boom, they're in your salad like 10 minutes later, right?
Right, exactly. Like we always joke around, there was that book years ago, what was it, like the $64 tomato? Like really growing your own tomatoes in the end isn't all that much less expensive than buying them in the store. But pea shoots are one that it is. It makes sense because it's far cheaper to buy a $2.99, high-end pack of pea seeds than it is to go to the store and buy these $6.99, $7.99, $8.99 for like a dozen little pea shoots. It's kind of crazy. It's bonkers. So I hope I didn't stray too far from the topic, Carol. Do pea shoots count?
Pea shoots totally count. You could do them as microgreens too. So you take a 4-inch pot, put normal potting soil in it with maybe some compost mixed in. Soak the peas overnight, put them on top, shoulder to shoulder, cover the whole surface. Put something over it to block the light. Once they germinate, get them on the windowsill under lights, and then, harvest when they're ready. And like you said, 7 days, maybe 10 days, boom. You've got all the pea shoots that you want. You don't have to accost the ones in your garden.
I love that. And I can envision it in my head, just, those little like brick packs that they sell. You just pack it right up. That fits right on a windowsill. That's a perfect idea. I love that. All right. I'm going to have to do that with my leftover pea seeds this year. All right, Carol. I think we're doing pretty good. Am I doing pretty good, Carol? Am I doing pretty good in the backseat?
You're doing great.
All right.
You're a greens expert. I love greens because anybody can become a greens expert in like a couple years. You just try all the ones you're interested in. The ones you kill, you learn something. The ones that greens are so low investment and time and space that you can just, experiment with them.
I love it. Greens are a gateway vegetable, it gets you into vegetable growing without the full committal of, vegetable growing. I
Yeah.
like it. I like it. All right. So give me a gateway green. Give me a gateway
Okay.
green.
All right. I don't know if everyone would consider this one a gateway green, but for my beloved spouse, this one is a gateway green, and it's spinach, just plain old spinach. And when we were doing loved ones' favorite plants, like a few episodes back, I asked my husband, like, what's your favorite plant that we have? And he goes, I like the vegetable garden. And he was sort of listing vegetables. Then when he said spinach, his eyes kind of lit up. Oh, spinach.
Are you married to Popeye? Do we not know this?
This is where Patrick gets his strength. I don't know. But we buy spinach, when we can't grow it. It's not terribly expensive, but it doesn't hold well, especially like the baby leaf spinach. I worry about the bacteria because sometimes you have like, E. coli breakouts for, packaged greens. And spinach is super, super easy to grow. And so the photo that I put in the show notes, I'm not sure what those varieties are because I will just generally try, 3 or 4 varieties in a season.
Mhm.
And in that case, I had 3 different varieties growing in one bed. And what I like to do is I start one variety, then a week or 2 later, I start another variety, then a week or 2 later, I start another variety so that I've got one that it's finishing and the others are coming along, and you've got the succession thing going on. And the other thing with spinach is if you cut it above what they call the basal plate, like where the leaves come out, you can cut and come again.
Nice.
So you can, but guys, if you're planting spinach, don't like stand there and admire the beauty of it when it's just perfect and say, okay, I've got to wait to cut it, because if you wait, it will bolt and it'll be over. When it looks perfect, cut it. Or, start cutting those baby leaves even earlier and enjoy it, because it doesn't last long, and it really doesn't like the heat. So this one of the true spring greens. It germinates best in cool soil. You can begin sowing in early spring, like as soon as the soil can be worked, as you mentioned with one of these other greens. And in warmer weather, lots of water will help germination, but the germination will still always be spottier in the heat of the season. So I've tried this as a fall green, starting it indoors even in August. And it just, you get it outside, it's hot, it's dry. If you don't stay on top of the watering, it just doesn't do quite as well in hot weather. So that's been it, Jay.
So talk to me about like the evolution of, because I think especially those new to greens, talk to me about the evolution of the leaf maturity. So we all know in the grocery store, you can get those plastic clam shells that are baby spinach, and it kind of looks like just this little oval, very tender, maybe a little larger than a $50 size. So is that young, immature spinach, and will we see that if we grow it ourselves?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And the other thing is, if you have a plant that's sort of on the larger side, you go into the center of it, you'll find those baby leaves. And
Okay.
when you're harvesting your own, you go through and just sort of cut out the baby leaves from each plant, and then you've got baby leaves for salad, and then you can come back later and take the bigger leaves for cooking.
Okay.
The 2 main differences that you'll notice in varieties is there are some that have smooth leaves. Like there's a variety I like called Space, which is more heat tolerant than a lot of other varieties. So it's a more multi-season spinach, but it has a nice flat leaf from the baby phase all the way through to maturity.
Okay. So it
And
never
then,
kind of gets that muscular, almost like twisted
yeah.
leaf where you get all that kind of puckering almost, right? Would you call
Yes,
it
they call
puckering?
that savoid, I think.
Savoid.
A
Okay.
savoid leaf, a heavily savoid leaf would be like a Bloomsdale. That's a
Yes.
classic variety, and that one is so wrinkly, it's folds all back on itself like origami. And I think something like Bloomsdale is better as a cooking green, although at the baby leaf stage, it adds a lot of nice volume to a salad mix. So you throw a few of those in there, and they're, kind of a fun texture.
I like it. I like it. Okay, so for the smooth leaf, you recommend the variety, the cultivar Space. Did I get that right?
Space.
Space.
Yes,
I mean,
Space.
that's a great name. And then for a more cooking or a more robust Savoy leaf, you're gonna go with Bloomsdale.
Yes.
Okay.
And
all
I'm
right.
not sure that those are the varieties that I am showing in the show notes, but those are two that I really like.
That's okay. That's okay. You know that, like, I love that, there is that contrast, because I always wondered that. I mean, is every single variety of spinach, and, you go on to like a Johnny Select Seeds or, a botanical interest, there will be like 50 types of spinach on there. Are they all going to give me that smooth baby spinach face? Because I like that stage of spinach. Once it starts getting all, looking like Stegosaurus skin, I'm out. I don't want any of that spinach anymore. So this is an education. I'm enjoying my time in the back seat today. I really am. I really am. All right. So I'm gonna do a lettuce. Because I do grow lettuce, and typically what I grow. So speaking of spouses, my spouse, one of his favorite meals is his mom's famous Caesar salad. So typically you will see me growing both red romaine and green romaine. I do a green romaine that's called Green Towers, but I decided to branch out a little bit this year. And this is going to sound very self-serving, but I enjoy the taste of leaf lettuce more than head lettuce, just standard, there's exceptions to every rule, but I don't like the cleaning that has to happen with leaf lettuce. And I don't care what anybody says, it is far more of a pain in the neck to clean leaf lettuce than it is head lettuce. Like, you get in there, you get all the little leaves, you got to rinse them. They're about 4 inches long. Then you're salad spinning. Even if you have a Dyson salad spinner, you don't get it completely dry. Then you're waiting. It's on the paper towels. You're like, all right, now I'm 5 hours into trying to make this salad. It's just a pain in the neck. So there's this variety that, yes, I gravitated to it at first when I read its description, because its name is Danielle Red Oak Leaf lettuce, but it's spelled like Danielle yells. And that's also very appropriate. So it's Danyelle, not like my name, but sounds like my name, because it seems to be one of these new, I'm going to call it like these hybrid lettuces. So they are a leaf lettuce, but they make a very tight rosette in their growth habit. So I have high hopes that the cleaning factor will be a bit easier with these tight rosette leaf lettuces. And Danyelle is a newer oak leaf variety, which used to be, back in the day, my favorite variety of lettuce was this oak leaf, because it's just sweet and it's tender and it's just a really, really nice lettuce overall. So I feel like this could be the best of both worlds. I really like the name too. Self-serving, I know. But it's touted as like an improvement upon red salad bowl oak leaf lettuce, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. It's a classic favorite, but again, a tighter rosette. And that rosette growth habit too helps the lettuce leaves from turning bitter as quickly, because leaf lettuce, that's the other thing that, it reaches that point of maturity and you're always like, is it ready? I don't know if it's ready. And like with spinach, you said you wait a day too long and then it's bitter. So being in that tight, compact rosette tends to keep it a little bit less bitter and holds longer in the garden. And they always say this, so I had to look it up. And I ended up in a Reddit forum, but I hate it when in a catalog you read something like it has excellent holding ability. And I'm like, holding what? Holding a softball? Like, what does that mean? So the fact of the matter is that it will stay in its mature form a bit longer in the garden. So if you go away for the weekend and you come back, it's not a total lost cause on this lettuce. It's not going to be completely bitter. It's not going to have bolted. It's not going to have matured beyond. It will hold in the garden a bit longer than a day of perfect harvest. Like with all lettuces though, I'm just going to say it, you can't want to grow these during the summer. Like it really is hard to grow lettuce during the summer. Once the temps start spiking into the 70s, you're pretty much out of the game, unless in a shadier location with enough water. That might be possible. But so Danielle Red Oak Leaf lettuce is 50 days to maturity, which I think is a fair number. It's not too long, not too short. And this is a new variety, or a newer variety this year, my understanding. And I actually found it from Harris Seeds and New England Seeds. So both of those companies do carry that seed. And I don't think today we're sponsored by a particular company, so it's okay to say that. So yeah, that is my lettuce recommendation, and I'll report back on how it goes with that, because it's my first foray back into leaf lettuces. Oh God, I hope it doesn't take me 5 hours to clean it. Carol, am I lying? Doesn't it take very long to clean leaf lettuce?
5 hours, Danielle. I don't know about 5 hours. I do it before dinner, and you know, here's a tip. Okay, so this is my best way of washing greens when you get a bunch of the little leaves, because that's my favorite. Yes. Big bowl of water, fill it with cold water, and put the greens in, sort of rinse them around. Grit sinks to the bottom. Here's what the thing most people will do with this page. Dump it into a colander, the grit goes back on top, right? So lift the leaves out of the water, put them in the salad spinner, and then spin them out, and grit stays in the bottom of the water bowl, and the leaves get, it really doesn't take usually more than one rinse. But if you have a lot of dirt on them, maybe another rinse just like that, new water.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I like it. I also would like you to link your salad spinner in the show notes, because I feel like I just must have an inferior salad spinner. Does Dyson make a salad spinner?
Because I know, but my salad spinner is like 20 years old. It was from IKEA, and I don't know if they even still make that one, but I don't. Yeah. A good salad
I feel like that's the key. They just don't make salad spinners like they used to, just like they don't make washer machines like they used to either.
Right.
All right. Well, all right. I'm having a great time in the back seat today, and you're driving us into the driveway. What do you got for your final green for fabulous spring greens?
All right. So I'm gonna do one that was new to me until, oh my goodness, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. And another editor at Fine Gardening was doing an article about greens, and it was the end of the season. They were like, "Can we grow all of these things?" I said, "Let me try." So I grew out almost everything that was on that plant list in the article, and Tatsoy was new to me, but that was on the list. Tatsoy is related to bok choy, if folks are familiar with that. So it's a Brassica rapa, and the variety is Narinosa. And so if you can imagine, it's sort of got a white stem and a spoon-like dark green leaf that's at the top. I think the stem is called a petiole, right? And at the top is a nice dark green, almost spinach-looking leaf. And this is one that you can eat raw in salad at 25 days from emergence. And then at 45 days, that's sort of the mature cooking green that you could stir fry. You can saute it, dice it up and cook it just like you would pretty much any other cooking green, a little onion in there, quite delicious. It works best when you direct sow it. And like a lot of the other sort of cabbagey related ones, it likes the cool weather. So plant it in early spring. Like it doesn't even mind frost. So you can be, weeks before your final frost, you can start planting it. Sow it every 2 weeks. If you're succession planting, until about 2 or 3 weeks before the last frost. And at that point, you're going to have diminishing returns because you can't really get germination when it's too cold and winter is starting to set in. But for us, that's a very long period when you can be growing this. And like you said, sort of sharing beds with other things. It doesn't mind a bit of shade. If anything, it gives it a bigger, more tender leaf. Yeah, it's fun. And it's a different shape at the baby leaf stage that is very fun in salad mixes.
All right, so you knew I was going to ask this question, I'm sure. What is the difference between Tatsoy and bok choy? Because I feel like I have a picture in my head of what bok choy looks like. Is there a relation at all?
They're very similar. They're
Okay.
super, super similar. It's just a different size. Like the Tatsoy tends to stay a little smaller, and bok choy gets a longer petiole. And more, like just like a heading habit, with Tatsoy sort of lower growing. But yeah, similar. If you like bok choy, you'll love Tatsoy.
Okay, all right, I like it. I like it. Tatsoy. Now, all right, I'm gonna ask also, was that the Ira Wallace article that was done many years ago for fine gardening?
If I can find it on our website, I'll put a link in the show notes. Yes, that was, I think it was like unusual spring greens. Like I was racing before the show and I forgot to look it up, but I'll track down that article. The other one I will track down and put in the show notes is the Grow Your Own Salad Mix, which I did. And for that article, I grew like a couple dozen varieties. Not all of them made it into the article, but that was a fun summer because I had a lot of salad.
The iron levels of your family were all through the roof that year. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, let's definitely, in my mind, I can see what I think it was the sidebar in that Ira Wallace article. And now when you mentioned like the shape of bok choy versus Tatsoy, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was visually beautiful. So yeah, we'll try to link that up in the show notes, guys. All right, so I am getting out of the back seat. I'm gonna drop my last spring green here, and this is an aspirational green that I've never grown, but I really, really enjoy the flavor of when I've had it out and I've seen it or picked it up at farmers market. So I'm gonna try it this year. It's chicory, but it's Catalonian chicory, which is a different variety of chicory. And I had to do some research on this one because so chicory is, kind of a fascinating green. You can use it at all these different stages. And the funny thing is it's awesome when it's young. You can use these small dandelion-like thick white stalks, tiny greens. You can cut those up. You can throw them into salads and stir fries and things like that. It's bitter. And that's not always the best selling point, but it really is, in the flavor profiles, just like arugula, used, here, there, and everywhere. It really does add to like this awesome flavor profile of other greens or other dishes that you're making. Goes well with anything that you would add lemon, garlic, and olive oil to. A bitter green, that's the baseline. If your recipe calls for either lemon, garlic, or olive oil, you're in. Throw chicory in there. Then Catalonian chicory is known for getting quite large and upright. In 70 to 75 days, it kind of creates this large, almost, it's a lot like chard. It's a lot like, romaine lettuce. It's got that kind of towering, tight bunch to it. At which point, I'm going to say the leaves become so bitter that they are almost inedible to me. I mean, you'd have to really cook them down pretty substantially. So you're going to eat the leaves when it's young, but when it gets to that mature phase, all is not lost. You haven't done this for no reason, because there's an Italian delicacy, and native Italian speaking write in, tell me I'm butchering this term because I'm sure I am, but it's called puntarelli, and it's Puntarelle. And it's the innermost stalks of that head of chicory. And they're kind of curly and they're white. And it's almost as if it blanches itself, right? So you've got this, head of greens. That's this giant head. And inside are these tender, almost asparagus-like white shoots. And it is the most delicious delicacy on the face of the planet. I dream about puntarelli. It is just delicious and a little bitter, but buttery, sauteed with garlic, olive oil, a little bit of black pepper. It is just the most delicious thing on the planet, in my humble opinion. I'm actually putting a picture of the puntarelli on our show notes because it's just yum. Just yum. So I snuck it in there, and it's good that it's the last thing that we talk about because yes, you have to grow that out to maturity, but chicory still has standing as a spring green because it is really delicious in its younger phase. But just know that, you're gonna have to grow it on. Also know that not all chicories will form that, large tower and give you those beautiful tender blanched stalks on the inside. You really need to go for, a lot of times it's called Italian chicory or Catalonian chicory, or, do a little research to find out, to make sure it's going to be one of those beefier varieties. I did look quickly online. Gourmetseed.com does offer a variety of those. And oh my gosh, I got so excited because they have a purple variety, which I had never seen before. So I can just imagine like those inner stalks being like pink and curly and just delicious. So so that's my final chicory. It's something you sow in the spring. It's got a long growing period in the garden, but I think it's worthy, it's fascinating, it's crunchy. Oh gosh, I'm hungry now, so I'm ready to check out.
Do you need to do anything special? Like, do you have to tie the leaves together, anything to get it to do the blanching?
No,
Okay.
it forms, it's like the hedge just formed this naturally like tight cluster. It's not really loosey goosey in a head form. It really is almost like the habit of a romaine lettuce, that it grows on top of itself. So it forms this football sized, if you will, tight head, and in the inside there is all of those tender blanched out white stalks, and it's delicious. So all right, I have high hopes this year. If I'm able to do it, Carol, I will treat you to a puntarelli dinner.
Oh, how exciting. Wow.
And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about his hate of greens.
It's really not my fault that at the mention of greens that you eat, my mind immediately goes to that most disgusting of childhood foes, canned spinach. Oh. I realise now that spinach can exist in a fresh form that may or may not be as delicious as Carol describes. I will never know, because I have no intention of ever trying it. It's too late for me. Spinach was forever ruined by my mum and her weekly Sunday dinner, which always included canned spinach. That green mess was the stuff of nightmares. I distinctly remember hearing the sound of the can opener crunching its way around the rim of what was soon to be a bit of healthy roughage for supper, according to Mum. To my mind, that nondescript smelly blob on my plate was indeed rather rough, in all senses of the word. No human should ever have to consume such an item, and I put up a stink, you can bet. I'd sit stone-faced in front of my plate, when all that was left was that pile of bloody spinach. And Mum would stare at me, equally stone-faced. It was a standoff, and both of us knew who was going to win. Mum. In the many years that followed, I would build affection for lettuce, arugula, and yes, even the wee bit of kale here or there, but never spinach. You will not find it in my freezer, nor in my garden, nor in any sort of can in my pantry. Popeye may have gotten super strength from that mushy, verdant mess, but all I ever got was a bad taste and sent to bed without dessert. So enjoy your spinach, Carol. I think you and my mum would have gotten along brilliantly.
I think we need to put Peter in a room with your husband so your hubby can extol the virtues of spring greens and bring Peter over to the other side.
He can be very convincing, Patrick can, so it might work. It might just work.
Let's see if our expert can convince you, Carol, to grow any greens that you haven't yet grown.
My name is Lucas Holman, and I am the University of Tennessee Horticulture Extension Agent for Wilson County, Tennessee. I'm extremely excited about this topic because these are three of my favorite cool season green crops. And I wanted to make sure that she would let me do it, so I got approval that I can use one of them that may be questionable on whether it's a spring green or not. But number one of my favorite greens is green onions. I think whenever you're trying to find something to add to a dish, we use it as garnish all the time in all of the dishes. And I think green onions are easy to grow. If you really can't grow green onions, you probably should find another hobby other than gardening. Green onions are simple if you are growing the correct ones for your region. So what I do is I grow my onions extremely tight in a row. I will usually plant them a couple of inches apart. And then if I want them to finish bulbing up so that I can have bulbs in storage in my garage, I will go through and pull up every other one. Now, with that being said, we have some onions that are going to grow great in your area, and we have some that are not going to bulb up right and grow appropriately. So when you look at onions, we've got three main types. We've got short day, intermediate day, and long day onions. If you're more in a northern region, you need to be growing the long day onion. Now, I'm actually in Tennessee, so I can grow pretty much short day, or I can grow the intermediate day. You can find a lot of maps online. You could say, well, I'm in this growing zone. I'm in this zip code. What onion should I be growing? With that being said, there are very specific cultivars, too, that will do really well. So one of the most popular ones that we usually see, we see candy onions. We see yellow granics. We see some called Vidalia. Some of these are not going to grow in your area, so make sure you're going to grow those that are specific to your region. And that may take you some actually searching around the internet, maybe going to your feed store, maybe your local box stores and trying to find some of these. If you go to some of these places and all it says is red onions, I probably would avoid it because do you know how many types of red onions are on the market today? Make sure you know the exact kind that you should be growing in your region. Normally, they're going to take anywhere from 60 days to 110 days to actually bulb up appropriately. But with spring greens, once you plant the sets of the bulbs, you're going to be getting greens pretty quickly because within a few weeks, they'll start putting out new leaves. In Middle Tennessee, where I'm at right now, we're actually planting onions this week. It's the last week of February. A lot of people and a lot of stores are starting to carry them. And it's exciting because we can get our hands back into the dirt. We're able to go outside and grow stuff again. So the whole drab of winter, which has just been a cold, gray bucket of mud here in Tennessee, we're starting to see some life back into the garden a little bit. If you are growing onions, make sure you cure them properly after you actually pull them up and make sure that they can be stored for a long time. If you want some that are going to be short day onions, if you want some that are going to be lasting a long time in storage, make sure you look for those that have a long storage potential. So onions are my number one favorite spring green because we can have greens pretty quickly in the garden, way before the danger of frost is already passed. Number two, lettuce. When you look at lettuce, the sheer amount of cultivars on the market today is daunting because we look at some and we see head lettuces, we see iceberg lettuces, we see romaine, Bib, we see butter bib type, butterhead type lettuce. We see all sorts of different cultivars on the market. When you are growing these things, they are usually pretty easy about a light frost. Now, we get a really heavy frost, they'll die. But we need to actually space them appropriately in the garden also. If you have a large iceberg type lettuce that you're trying to grow in the garden, make sure you space that appropriately. If I'm just wanting to grow leaf lettuce, those things can be packed extremely tight in the row. So leaf lettuces, like one of the oldest standard ones, is called black seeded Simpson. They're around for a long time. Some of the newer ones are called salad bowls. There's a red salad bowl on the market now. When you look at these, those things can just be dribbled into a row and extremely tight. And you can go through You can cut those back and they flush back out. Some of the head lettuces, they just don't work out that way. So if you've got romaine, or if you've got a butterhead, or if you've got an iceberg type lettuce, make sure you're giving those things ample room to grow so that you can actually get the head, because that's why we grow this lettuce. If you're looking for some newer cultivars of lettuce, you may try out some of the newer ones from All American Selections. I grew Sandy during the pandemic, and I had some of the prettiest oak leaf lettuce that I've had. Try something new. And if you're trying to get kids hooked into gardening, I think lettuce is really simple to do that. Normally we can plant lettuce seeds and we'll start having something edible within about 30 or 45 days, and that's with the growing conditions. If we get really cold, you might have to actually go through and cover it. When we start getting really high temperatures in summertime or wherever you're at late spring, we may hit 85 or 90 degrees. This lettuce is going to bolt really quickly. What do I mean by bolting? It's going to go to seed. Normally, it tastes really bitter. It's best to just go ahead and rip it completely out of the garden and replace it with something else for the summertime. A lot of people around here will use bush bean, and then we have some people that will come after that with zucchini or squash or something along that lines, because bush beans and zucchini and squash make a crop before we have the killing frost in the fall time. The last green that I look forward to, and I do this in the spring and I do this also in the fall, is turnips. And normally I'll plant turnips over my entire garden. And I grew up in the greenhouse industry. It's always interesting to me. The guy came into a garden center one time when I was working. I was there by myself, and he said, "You Southerners are just different." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You guys eat the tops of the turnips and you throw the bottoms away." And he said, "I'm from up north." He said, "I eat the bottoms and throw the tops away." Now, I think that's a broad statement, because I think the bottom and the tops are both good. Some people like them raw. I'm not a raw turnip person. I like them cooked. They have kind of the consistency of a mashed potato if you've never had them before. But a lot of people around here, they'll cook them together. And I think if you are a turnip green fan, you're probably a fan of many of the other greens that we have. Kale and mustard and collards, kind of the big ones that we see people growing a lot around here. But if you're growing turnips, make sure you're planting the right turnip. So the two main types that we have, purple top and 7-top. So if you want the turnips themselves, usually you're going to plant purple top. It has the purple top. If you just want the leaves and you don't want any edible bottom parts, you're going to plant 7-top. But then we also have some of these Japanese type salad turnips that are coming up on the market too. They're smaller. They kind of look like a bigger radish. They're usually white. We've got some pink cultivars on the market now also. Usually they are eaten raw. If you want some of those, people will space those appropriately in the garden also, because if we want roots, we need to make sure that we're actually spacing these things appropriately. When we're looking at all three of these green vegetables that I was talking about, the green onions, the turnips, and the lettuce, make sure you're giving them room. So turnip greens, you can broadcast those all over your entire garden. Onions, generally you're going to plant them in a row. Now, the lettuce are generally planted in a row. I'm really, in the fall time, I normally go through and plant my entire garden in turnips, turnip greens, collard greens, mustard greens, and then I usually turn that under in the springtime before I start planting anything else, because I enjoy having a cover crop over my garden in the wintertime, and then I love adding back that organic matter. I appreciate y'all letting me take the time to tell you about my 3 favorite spring green crops. Have a good day.
So Lucas asked me when we were first talking about this if he could count green onions, and that's when I decided if it's green and you can eat it in the spring, it's in. So,
I love it. I was thinking, oh man, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one who did pea shoots. Somebody else did something other than a leafy green. So yay, bravo, Lucas. Well, happy greens growing, Carol.
You too. We'll compare notes at the end of the season.
Sounds good.